October 4th, 2025. Well, the Schumer shutdown continues. I guess we've completed, what is it now, 3 days of shutdown. The Democrats pretty much are still holding firm, voting against a clean bill, and are insisting on massive concessions from the Republicans in order to open the government up again. And so I tend to think that this is going to be one of the longer lasting shutdowns. I may be wrong about that, but I sort of had the feeling that this was coming. About a week before it happened, I put out a video saying that it's going to be coming, because it was looming, as I think I said. Because I think that the Democrats have been struggling to try to put together a position to oppose Trump, and I think they finally found a lever that they can use. I guess I wonder, are they thankful that they didn't end the filibuster now? Because remember, if they'd have ended the filibuster, we could easily pass the continuing resolution, and regardless of what they want. But at any rate, of course, Rand Paul won't be with us on that one because it's too much money for him, and he just can't vote for anything realistic, even if it's not the best thing in the world. But let's don't get off on Rand Paul. But libertarians kind of bug me that way. They may be right in theory, but unfortunately, the world isn't based on theory. So, but as it is here, getting back to Schumer, which is the main topic here, they're holding in there. I know that the media is putting out some fake polls right now, which show that people overwhelmingly support the Democrats on this, but I think that's probably fake because the question they were asked, was so blatantly one way, and if you aren't really fully in understanding the whole context, a lot of people would probably vote that way. But I don't. But at any rate, so. Although on the concerning side, the Rasmussen still has Trump down by about 6 points now, rather than running maybe 50-50 to even up one or two. So it does look like that this may have had some damage. Of course, you can always have fluctuations in these tracking polls on short-term basis, so we'll have to see how it trends later. On the other hand, I always have the attitude about the shutdown things and who's to blame doesn't really much matter in the long run. It's more like who wins is what really matters. Because basically, the general elections, the next awful election, as you call it, is over a year away for the House of Representatives and for many Senate seats. And I don't think we're going to be thinking about who's to blame in the shutdown at that time. It's going to be more about what the outcome was and what the impact of that was. And of course, the people that would lose the benefits under the Republican position, which is currently in law at the moment, will probably not be too happy. The question is what percent of them were going to vote Republican and will actually change their vote over it. That's the real issue. The real, of course, the issue there is that ultimately, the contention is that these benefits on the ACA that they keep talking about, otherwise known as Obamacare, or emergency benefits that were put in place during the COVID period, and then they were kept in place after COVID was over with by Biden for the normal political viewpoint. That you can't, don't let a crisis go to waste, right? It's when you can always change things to your political advantage and spend more money. So, at any rate, maybe down the road, some kind of a compromise might be worked out, which wouldn't be the full Biden level benefits, but might be something less than that, but maybe not totally repealed. I don't know. That's a good question. But for the moment, nobody's negotiating, and it's a bit of a showdown. I guess we're going to see is who actually, feels the most pain. For the moment, though, I think that there's also the issue that there's some backdoor ways that were in there that were kind of banned, in which it allowed certain states to actually fund health care for illegal immigrants. And I think that that's one of the big bones of contention there. Of course, we have a lot of illegal immigrants here, and it's going to be an ongoing problem. Of course, we're also trying to get them out of the country, and the thing there, of course, is that some of the illegal immigrants probably don't need a subsidized thing, and others maybe do. I mean, depending on the recent ones that haven't assimilated into the economy, for instance, probably are the ones we're mainly talking about here. Um, and of course, that whole thing has been a disaster all along, the illegal immigration. At least we've shut down the flow of illegal immigrants, and by the Trump policy, so that part is working out pretty good. And for the moment, Trump and his people seem to be fairly confident in their position. But the Democrats are pointing to some polls, I think, that are, in other words, I think that there'll be a marginal negative in people's perceptions here. But I think it's who really wins in the long run that really matters, and it's not going to be a decisive issue in the next election as to who did the shutdown. If you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, and you can click the bell for notifications, or you can also follow me on Rumble. By the way, also wish to thank the recent people who have subscribed. They've finally pushed me over the 100 mark, which I appreciate. So maybe something good is going to happen now. I don't know. So I was told it might. But yeah, so that's kind of the way I see that progressing. Basically, the whole issue comes down to why not go ahead and reopen the government and then continue to negotiate on the specific bills. Of course, that still heads to a point at which obviously there would presumably be another shutdown battle when the continuing resolution would expire, because in 7 weeks or whatever it is, the Democrats are still going to have the same objective to reestablish to achieve those particular political goals that they're pushing for. So the battle is going to continue for quite a while, and perhaps they're having it out now so they don't have it out into the Christmas vacation, perhaps. Anyway, so that's kind of the situation on that. On the other hand, on the other front, as the Trump is moving into certain areas such as Portland, Oregon, and Memphis and Chicago with ICE, and trying to capture criminal illegal aliens particularly, and I guess all the other ones that just happen to run into in the process of capturing the criminal ones and deporting them. And of course, we're having protests by leftists who are trying to interfere with ICE operations and getting into street struggles with the National Guard that's been deployed, for instance, I guess in Portland and so forth, to protect the ICE operations. And so those are proceeding as this goes on. Meanwhile, Trump is launching tactical strikes against boats from Venezuela, which are claimed to be smuggling drugs into the country, presumably because of the tight border restrictions that have been put in place. Smuggling is now going more to the sea rather than over land. Then, as that's the assumption. Critics of this policy are claiming that there's no real evidence these people had drugs on the boat, and that we could go in with, and basically arrest the people and prove that they had drugs. Obviously, the strikes are probably meant to be a deterrent, I suspect. That is to say that the idea isn't that we'll necessarily strike every boat around, but once you see a few of them go up that way, your likelihood of wanting to take to the sea with a load of drugs is probably going to be greatly reduced. Meanwhile, certain people, again, are trying to make all kind of yelling, screaming things like war crime and so forth. However, they've been declared to be a terrorist organization, and under the same rules of engagement we've used against other kinds of terrorists, particularly in the Middle East, it can be done, and we'll have to just kind of see how that pans out for us, or for them. Meanwhile, there's an accumulation of naval force off the coast of Venezuela, and Maduro, I guess, is trying to mobilize his militias in case we do an incursion. I tend to doubt we're going to actually do a land incursion there. I think we'll probably be more likely to do strikes against maybe certain terrorists or something like that. I don't know. It's hard to know how far that's going to go. An actual land invasion would probably turn into another mess, just like going into places like Afghanistan or Iraq. Maybe not quite that intense, but maybe it could be a guerrilla war, and that would be a problem, obviously. So we'll see how that develops. I think probably Trump is going to have a more thought out policy. Meanwhile, it looks like Trump is making some progress on his peace plan for the Middle East and for Gaza, and supposedly the Hamas has agreed to release all the hostages, and Trump has therefore decreed that Israel should cease the attack on Gaza pending the release of the hostages. Of course, if the hostages aren't actually released, then things might go back to a different level. But for the moment, there's perhaps light at the end of the tunnel that we can get the hostages out and end this conflict, which I think might be to Israel's advantage at this point anyhow, because they're getting a lot of international blowback and diplomatically and so forth over what happened. And it looks like that the kind of policy that Trump is pushing might be the best for them, that they've kind of done all they can do basically on this. And most of the people there in Gaza are living in kind of a wasteland anyhow, so we'll have to see what happens after the shooting stops and how it's resolved. I mean, I still tend to favor the idea that they should be evacuated from the area to some other place to reestablish their lives. My candidate is Libya. The theory that Libya is largely unpopulated, and I think there's like two factions at each side of the east and west sides of Libya. So if we put them near the coast on the middle, an area that would occupy about the same size of Gaza or even more, then if aid would come in and rebuild their facility there, they wouldn't be in direct contact with Israelis, and perhaps we would have a degree of peace. But that's just me. Some people call that ethnic cleansing. So, but maybe that'd be a better life for the people involved rather than pushing for trying to do maximum harm to Israel. It seems like the normal internationalist approach from the UN and so forth is. So anyway, and on another front, going to apparently the French at least temporarily seized a oil tanker alleged to be part of the Shadow Fleet, and some people are alleging had launched drones that caused some disruption of airports in Denmark, although there's no real proof that those drones, if they are drones, came from there. Another theory is they could have actually been UAPs, because after all, there's UAPs flying over a lot of other airspaces, but they could have also been. At any rate, latest I saw, the Hindustan Times at least claims that the French have agreed to release it after Putin accused France of piracy. So we'll see whether that's really true and how it plays out for future ships going through there. And we'll kind of keep an eye on everything. Meanwhile, in a response, I guess, to the attacks on Russian oil refineries, which have caused gasoline shortages in Russian territories, the Russians have stepped up their attacks on the natural gas supplies and electrical infrastructure of Ukraine, in retaliation, which kind of goes to show is, while Ukraine may want to hurt Russia, maybe they're going to get hurt back worse if they do. I still think a negotiation to end the conflict would be a good idea. I do think that the Russians have kind of missed the opportunity to open a channel of negotiation, if nothing else, to give Trump some political cover against the hawks in the Congress here that want to do all kind of things. But in the meantime, we'll see how that again goes. But for the moment, the war kind of continues as always. I think a slow advance of the Russians in most theaters, and unlike some of the hyperbole we've heard later about how Ukraine is going to retake everything, that doesn't seem to be in the offing at the moment. At any rate, so I will be wrapping this up for now. I'll be posting this as always on YouTube and Rumble, and the address of my social media accounts are in the description below. And I've been engaged in a few retorts to various liberals about the shutdown, so you can follow me, particularly on X. All for now.